First off, what has changed? There's been a slight shift to the right, an increase in the initial wind speed for Tropical Storm Nicholas. The forecast rain amounts have been reduced slightly. So with Nicholas, the center continues to be difficult to identify. There has been a slight shift eastward in track based on the best estimate of the center. And landfall is forecast this evening down near Matagorda Bay or just a little bit east down toward Palacios. There still is an off chance it could reach minimal hurricane status before landfall. If not, would make landfall as a strong tropical storm. The forecast is for the system to track inland. You can see the cone there, along with the center track and the center positions at different times. There is still some uncertainty in the track direction and speed, so we're going to have to watch that. If it were to track on the right-hand side of the cone, it would tend to hug the coast. It's also possible it could go on the left-hand side and track more inland. The speed of the system is still a little bit uncertain, believe it or not. It is forecast to slow down some, but move steadily enough through to push the rain through the area, out of the area, probably by tomorrow afternoon. Still a major concern for flash flooding, also the possibility of some storm surge and high winds, and can't rule out a tornado or two on the upper Texas coast. Here's a summary of impacts around the area. We are looking for those high winds, especially near where the center comes ashore, down near Matagorda Bay or Palacios, or a little further east, possibly, given the shift. Down in that area, we could be looking at 60 to 70 mile per hour winds or wind gusts as the storm comes ashore early tonight, or actually a little bit after midnight. For the rest of our coastal areas, including Galveston Island and Galveston Bay, we could be looking at tropical storm force winds or at least wind gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour. The winds are expected to occur tonight and early Tuesday. Those higher winds will push out of the area, hopefully, most likely rather, by Tuesday afternoon. There will be some weakening of the system as it moves inland, and it will be translating to the northeast. Storm surge, we do have storm surge watches and warnings up for the area for minor to moderate coastal flooding. We're looking at 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, potentially in the warned area, and 2 to 4 feet in the watch area, and I'll show you that in a moment. That storm surge threat, looks like the high tide tonight is going to be the highest surge, but some of those high water levels will extend into Tuesday as well. Moderate to high risk of flash flooding, that's still our greatest concern. We'll talk more about that in a moment. That's most likely going to be in the coastal counties, extending to some extent inland as well, and we'll talk about that. That threat would be really tonight and Tuesday primarily. We've had some localized flooding even today, so that's what we're dealing with. Tornado, there's no immediate concern for tornadoes. Looking at the radar, the environment is just not quite right at this point, but maybe later tonight we could see a couple of tornadoes along the coast. And the marine area as well, with high seas and high winds associated with those high-end tropical storm force winds. Here's a look at the latest satellite and radar. You can see on satellite those thunderstorms, those cold cloud tops associated with Nicholas over the western Gulf. And you can see, looking at the Houston radar, these greens are generally light to occasionally moderate rain pushing in off the Gulf. But you can see that embedded heavier rain offshore. And we can tolerate the sort of lighter rain at the leading edge. But it's going to be perhaps these heavier downpours as the system comes in. Those may penetrate further inland, and those would give us the flash flooding. As far as wind timing, we're right on. We're pretty close to landfall now, and we should be seeing tropical storm force sustained winds into Matagorda Bay shortly. In fact, there's been a few observations already with some winds up in tropical storm force range. I believe they were wind gusts, but they may have even been sustained. I was briefed on that a moment ago. So we're seeing that occur down the coast now. And you can see those timing arcs. So if we get tropical storm force winds up around Galveston Bay, we're looking at that around midnight or a little thereafter, and up into Houston as well. And then you can see by 8 a.m. Tuesday, those tropical storm force winds potentially into Louisiana. The highest chances of tropical storm force winds are in these these brighter colors here. And you can see really that area around Matagorda Bay has the highest, but these are high values really for our entire coastline, all the way up to Galveston Bay, including Bolivar Peninsula. So we would expect tropical storm force winds really over most of our coastal areas and extending at least a couple tiers of counties inland from the coast based on these wind probabilities. The higher end tropical storm force winds, greater than 58 miles per hour, we think those will be confined closer to where the storm makes landfall, which right now is forecast to be, as we talked about, near or a little east of Matagorda Bay. So that's where we're likely to see those much, much higher winds. We can look at the wind timing a little differently based on the forecast here. And what we're looking at in yellow is an area of 58 mile per hour winds or greater projected at 1 a.m., where the center location has just made landfall down near Palacios around this time. So you can see there those higher winds in Matagorda and Brazoria County as we get to midnight or a little after. The blue area is intended to indicate a rough depiction of where tropical storm force winds may be occurring at that time. So by that time, they're extending up the coast as well into Galveston Bay and the greater Houston area. By 7 a.m., you can see the max wind area is getting closer into Harris, Fort Bend, and parts of Brazoria County, sort of the greater Houston area, where we could be looking at some higher end winds. Probably more on the order of 40 to 50 miles per hour at that time. And then by 1 p.m., you can see the back edge of those tropical storm force winds working through the area. Still some higher gusts at that time over our eastern zones, including Chambers and Liberty counties. So this don't look at this as far as exact timing, but it gives you a general sense at what we're looking at as we go through the night and tomorrow morning. Storm surge warnings up for now our entire coastal area for the potential of storm surge, flooding over normally dry ground, potentially as high as 3 to 5 feet in the warned area, 2 to 4 feet in the upper part of the warned area. So the highest surge will likely be down near landfall and perhaps a little bit to the right. So we're looking down near Matagorda Bay, coastal Matagorda County, and coastal Brazoria County for the highest surge. Hurricane Center is running a surge model, and this is meant to show areas that could be inundated by this elevated water levels. And most of the areas are low-lying marshy areas, so it's going to be those areas that normally flood with elevated tide levels. And the blue indicates flooding 1 to 3 feet above ground level. The yellow, greater than 3 feet. So you can see the areas there as we look at the area between Matagorda Bay and San Luis Pass. Working our way up the coast, looking at Galveston Island and parts of Galveston and Brazoria counties. Mostly those marshy areas getting the water. And for Galveston Island, it would be on the bay side most likely. And we'll look at the timing in a moment. That this is what we're looking at mostly for the high tide tonight, but for the bay side, perhaps into Tuesday. Looking at Bolivar, again, mostly bayside flooding, 1 to 3 feet, a few pixels of 3 feet or greater. and then low-lying parts of Chambers County as well, seeing water from the elevated tides from Nicholas. Timing for Galveston, we've been showing this all week, and you've watched these peaks get a little bit higher each time. We're looking at high tide in the 4 to 5 foot above mean lower low water occurring tonight. This is consistent, again, with this storm surge warning that we have up. And typically at those levels, 4 to 5 feet, we do have some flooding of lower lying areas and even some roadways. So we are really looking at the high tide tonight as the primary one. If you look beyond that, the subsequent high tides are a fair amount lower. Same picture down there, Freeport, 4 to 5 feet above mean lower low water with some surge flooding of low-lying areas. And we already looked at the map where those areas were based on the surge modeling. Pier 21, I did not show this earlier, but it's important because occasionally we can get more bayside flooding even as the low pulls away. But again, it's focused on this high tide tonight, 4 to 5 feet. So even on the bayside of Galveston Island, we'd be looking at some high water in the lower areas. Total rainfall, I mentioned this was reduced slightly. This is actually an old graphic, so I'll update that with the slides that we send out. Although the amounts shown are not too different than what the new graphic will show. Forecast to produce 6 to 12 inches, along the upper Texas coast, sort of in the area in orange here, and then lesser amounts as you go further inland. Isolated higher amounts are possible, and we still have that possibility of some life-threatening flash and urban flooding where the heavier, more intense rain bands occur later tonight and early Tuesday. Looking at the flash flood risk, it's greatest there in the pink area, a high risk. So that's where we would expect the highest rain rates and the greatest danger of significant flash flooding, including Chambers, Galveston, Brazoria, and Matagorda counties. And then a moderate risk as we get through greater Houston, down through Wharton and Jackson counties, and then a lesser risk, but still some risk for flash flooding as we get farther north into the slight and marginal areas. For tomorrow, you see everything shifts to the east as the system shifts east, and we've discussed that already. Tuesday morning will still be probably raining over the eastern part of the area, and that could continue that flash flood threat there with a slight risk area for our eastern counties for tomorrow. I showed this earlier just to give general timing of the rainfall. You know, we see it on radar now, kind of pushing in from the southwest, and we look for that heavier rain to be out ahead of the center, sort of leading it. That's the way the system looks now. All the heavy rain is on the east and northeast flank of Nicholas, and so this still looks fairly accurate for the general timing of that band pushing across the area from southwest to northeast. As far as tornadoes, as I mentioned, right now there's no indication of any tornadic type storms on radar. But later tonight, as the storm pushes in, it's possible we could get a few spinning cells along the band. So Storm Prediction Center indicating a couple of tornadoes possible tonight on the upper Texas coast, but nothing really imminent on radar. So finally, we're looking at a stormy period now for the next 18 to 24 hours. We still have that potential for flash flooding, high winds, storm surge, and isolated tornadoes. Flash flooding still the greatest concern. We have seen those amounts taper down slightly, but we still have that risk of flash flooding. We've had some localized flooding even today. Flash flood concerns will depend on the rain rates. Light to moderate rain more manageable. But when we get those more intense downpours and thunderstorms, that's when we may see that flash flooding. And we do expect some of those to come in tonight as the storm pushes in. Improving conditions Tuesday afternoon and night based on the current projections, the current track. Still possible it could slow down, so we're going to have to continue to monitor this. There is still some differing views on the models. And river flooding will also be a concern depending on where the rain falls in the basins. Looking at San Jacinto, Harris County Bayou, San Bernard, Tres Palacios, Lavaca, and Navidad. And we do have